Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Just for the record, my name is Kelly Potenza, Stratford District 19, and I'm going to respectfully submit testimony in support of HB 1380, the Replacement Value Property Assessment Act. What I just passed out is going to be what I'm going to talk about first. So this is basically empirical evidence from the Rochester sales versus assessments. And before discussing this theory, I just want to ground this bill in actual data. So I have provided the committee with real-world sales and assessment comparisons from Rochester. So this is covering the manufactured housing. I will send you, because I didn't want to waste too much paper, I will send you the single-family homes from April 2023 to September 2024. That's what this is right now for manufactured, as well as for the commercial sales. So the commercial sales, for example, in assessed value has multiple problems too in regards with this data. So for example, in late 2022, 2-10 Townsend Lane, a multifamily sold for $7,775,000. It was assessed at $8,814,600. These charts show assessed values that are widely inconsistent with actual sale prices, including numerous examples where the assessed value exceeds the verified arm's length sales price. In the manufacturing housing data alone, multiple properties sold for one amount and were assessed higher than what a willing buyer actually paid, which directly contradicts the premise that assessments reflect true and full value. This pattern repeats across housing types and price points, demonstrating that current assessment practices are not merely imprecise, but structurally untethered from market reality, harming taxpayers who have no mechanism to realize this paper value. So basically, this is a real solution. It's not more political theater. It's frankly exhausting to listen to both political parties, stand at podiums, send out news releases, or post memes on social media year after year declaring property taxes are out of control or that the sky is falling, and it is falling right now on New Hampshire, while offering nothing beyond talking points, temporary exemptions, or blame shifting. Homeowners do not need more rhetoric, they need structural reform. HB 1380 is an actual solution. It addresses the root cause of the problem by fixing the assessment methodology itself, rather than layering Band-Aids onto a system that continues to inflate values disconnected from cost, income, or ability to pay. This bill moves us from endless political complaints to real, measurable relief grounded in objective value. So I'm going to give you a little historical content. When and how New Hampshire shifted to market-driven assessment. It's important to be precise and honest about history. New Hampshire did not experience a single statutory switch to market value assessment. Rather, the shift occurred incrementally through court interpretation and administrative practice, not through an illicit vote of the legislature. RSA 75-1 has long required property to be assessed at, quote, full and true value. But over time, that phrase became judicially interpreted as fair market value, with increasing reliance on sales comparison models rather than cost-based or income-based approaches. By the late 20th century, particularly after statewide equalization efforts expanded, assessment practice became increasingly dominated by market modeling and mass appraisal techniques, even though the statute itself never required speculative market pricing. This evolution occurred largely through administrative convention and court deference, not constitutional amendment or clear legislative intent. As a result, New Hampshire now operates under an assessment system that is market-driven by practice, not constitutionally mandated, leaving ample authority for the legislature to correct course through HB 1380 without violating RSA 75 or constitutional uniformity requirements. This is a key point for the committee. There is no constitutional requirement that property taxes be based upon speculative market price, only that taxation be proportional, reasonable, and uniform. HB 1380 fits squarely with that authority. This is the core problem. Market value assessment is speculative and unstable. Under current New Hampshire law, municipalities are required to assess property at its full and true value, which has been interpreted through statute and case law as market value, RSA 75.1 and RSA 75.8. While market value may be appropriate for private transactions, it is deeply problematic as a tax base because it is driven by speculation, credit expansion, investor behavior, and regional and national bubbles, none of which reflect the actual physical value or replacement cost of a home. We have seen the consequences of this approach repeatedly. We have the history. 2007 and 2009 housing collapse followed years of exaggerated market pricing, which inflated assessments and tax burdens before collapsing the entire system. It forced millions of Americans into foreclosure and financial distress. Earlier real estate cycles, including the late 1980s and early 1990s correction, similarly showed when taxation follows speculative pricing instead of objective value, homeowners bear the risk while governments collect the upside. When municipalities tax based on speculative pricing highs, but offer no protection during downturns, homeowners are exposed to all the downside risk with none of the upside liquidity. How this destroys homeowners and forces people out of their homes. Property taxes are not optional. Unlike a mortgage, they cannot be refinanced, renegotiated, or deferred without penalty. When assessments jump on market hype, seniors on fixed incomes see tax bills rise faster than Social Security COLAs. Low and middle income families face displacement, not because their home changed, but because the market did. Homeowners are forced to sell or take on debt simply to pay taxes or unrealized paper value. This violates the basic principle of taxation proportionally, embedded in Part 1, Article 12 of the New Hampshire Constitution, which requires that taxes be reasonable, proportional, and for the benefit of the people, not speculative windfalls for government. This is where the rubber meets the road, because this is all based, this happened throughout the state, but let's just talk about Rochester. The Rochester example, tax cap compliance through valuation inflation. In Rochester, after a citywide reevaluation, the city publicly emphasized a lower tax rate per thousand of assessed value, while simultaneously increasing total assessed value by over $2 billion. Let me be specific. That total valuation increase was $2.3 billion, bringing the total base to $5.1 billion. So, in 2024, the city of Rochester underwent a citywide full statistical revaluation, increasing that total net value valuation, like I just said, by $2.3 billion. It was based upon, of course, on online research. It's in Foster's Daily Democrat. It's all proven. There was a lot of articles about this. So this massive surge in property values led to a significant reduction in total tax rate, which dropped by like $10.89. And here's where the rubber meets the road. So the impact on property taxes. Mobile homes experienced the highest increase, with an average values rising by 208%. Condos increased by an average of 94%. Single-family homes increased by an average of 73%. The reevaluation was the first since 2019. It was aimed at aligning assessments with current market value, with 2024 rates finalized in late December. So while the municipality claimed compliance with the municipal tax cap under RSA 32.5b, the lived experience for many homeowners was starkly different. Higher tax bills driven by inflated assessments, not by increased services or property improvements. The practice creates what many residents reasonably perceive as a Ponzi-like dynamic. The rate is lowered to signal restraint, while the valuation base is inflated to extract more revenue, disproportionately harming fixed income, low income, and middle income residents, while higher income homeowners absorb increases more easily. HB 1380 directly addresses this loophole by requiring that assessment methodology itself not be used to increase the overall tax levy, reinforcing the intent of RSA 32.5b rather than allowing it to be functionally bypassed. I'm going to talk about Massachusetts for a little bit. My husband's from Massachusetts. He tells me about this stuff all the time. He's a real estate broker, has been for over 20 years. Now he works for a very large producer in regards with development, FW Webb. So when inflated assessments cross the line, Massachusetts provides a cautionary example of what happens when assessment practices lose credibility. So many homeowners, they actually have collaborated together, and they have successfully challenged municipalities for over-assessing properties beyond fair value, including cases where courts ruled that assessments were disproportionate, unsupported, or inconsistent with statutory standards, resulting in abatements and refunds to taxpayers. These cases underscore a critical point. When valuation becomes untethered from objective reality, it invites litigation, erodes trust, and ultimately costs the taxpayers more, both in refunds and legal expense. HB 1380 is designed to prevent New Hampshire from heading down the path by reducing subjectivity and speculation in assessments. Why replacement cost assessment aligns with existing New Hampshire law? New Hampshire already recognizes cost, depreciation, and objective valuation methods in property assessment practice, RSA 75.1, RSA 75.8A, and RSA 75.8C. HB 1380 builds on that foundation by prioritizing replacement value as the primary assessment driver, allowing for depreciation and objective land valuation, reducing reliance on volatile market comparisons that fluctuate independently of a property's physical reality. This approach stabilizes taxation while remaining consistent with the constitutional and statutory requirement that property be assessed fairly and uniformly. So, when this bill came forward, I reached out to the largest assessing firm in New England. They're called Avatar Associates of New England. So I personally spoke with them. So they are actually serving approximately 65% of New Hampshire's towns and municipalities. So I have learned a lot from them and the work that they do. So Avatar has indicated a willingness to work collaboratively with me on an amendment, because I know this bill is not perfect in its state, related to implementation issues that they have and some timing. This bill that could help address, they feel that this bill could help address the severe statewide shortage of qualified assessors, which is a problem that has been going on for quite some time, and that a replacement cost-based framework could simplify assessments, improve consistency, and reduce appeals. This is critical because RSA 21J3.8, the Department of Revenue Administration, already struggles with assessor capacity and training. HB 1380 moves the system towards a more sustainable and administratable model. Why HB 1380 is right reform at the right time. It protects homeowners from speculative market bubbles. It restores transparency and predictability to property taxation. It reinforces the intent of existing tax cap law, RSA 32B5. It aligns assessment practice with constitutional proportionality and responds directly to professional assessor capacity constraints. Conclusion: homes are not investment vehicles for government revenue extraction. They are where people live, raise families, and age in place. HB 1380 restores fairness by grounding property taxation in objective replacement value rather than speculative market excess, and by recentering the system on the people it is meant to serve. When assessments exceed actual sale prices, and homeowners are taxed on value they never received and can never realize, the system is no longer measuring value. It is manufacturing revenue. Let's get some relief to the New Hampshire taxpayers in the 234 cities and towns. For these reasons and probably many others, I respectfully urge the committee to recommend ought to pass on HB 1380. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Potenza. I assume you're willing to take questions.
Sure.
Okay.
And I will be sending my testimony to the committee as well as some other documents so you can just see how disproportionate those assessments are, the sale prices with the assessed value.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Committee appreciates that as well. So at this time, I would like to explain how we're going to proceed at this point in time. I have been contacted by a prime sponsor whose bill is scheduled to be heard in a few minutes.
Oh.
That particular prime sponsor has another bill in another committee that is scheduled for 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to
Recess.
need to recess this bill
Good idea.
to a date, which is today, and time certain. And at 9:55, I will be opening up the aforementioned bill and allow that prime sponsor to introduce his legislation. And then,
I'm totally fine. I don't have any committee today, and I know how this is a lot of juggling, so whatever you need to do, I'll sit in the,
okay, so I appreciate
Yeah.
that. So to have things not so complex, I'll open that bill, we'll finish that bill, and then it sounds like you're willing to
Yeah,
come
you can
back
come
to
back
this.
to me.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we can take a couple of questions, Representative Potenza, because it's not quite 10:55. I'm at 9:55.
Okay.
So I see Representative Majori has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking this question. It's about the last thing that you said to pass OTP on this. This is a very interesting bill, but you said something that you think that, and others think that it might need to be amended. So
Yeah, I am not the expert on this at all, and there are many people that are. But in speaking with the kind of contracted assessment community is has been wonderful and eye-opening. So the concerns that they had is just has to do with, timing, right? With implementation and things like that. I am willing to listen and make any changes that could get this through. This is 100% a nonpartisan. I mean, this is really something that could make a huge difference for New Hampshire, because we all know, I assume, we all know what's coming. With the price of gold and all of these things, and with our fiat currency in the toilet, and these prices that keep going up, that crash is going to be 10 times worse than what we saw in 2008. So,
Thank you. So at this time, the chair is going to recess the public hearing on House Bill 1380 local. Time the chair, yes, it's past 10 o'clock. So at this time, the chair will open the hearing on House Bill 1380 local. Can you find Representative Potenza? Yep, thank you. The chair recognizes the prime sponsor, Representative Potenza. Questions for the prime sponsor? Representative Dolan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. What difference will this bill make as opposed to a taxpayer that feels they've been aggrieved by the value of the assessment? Why wouldn't the filing a tax abatement to fix that solve the problem?
because it doesn't fix the inherent problem, which is, I believe, completely a flawed model. So, and that puts the burden on the taxpayer. Do you know how many people don't do that? They don't know how to navigate the system with an abatement and that whole process. It's unbelievable. The amount of phone calls that I have received, because I have my phone number on the general court website and then on my own website, is unbelievable. 2 days ago, I received a call from a woman in Rochester. She's done. She's out. her taxes went up by $3,000, she's out. She's going to sell her house. She's moving to Tennessee. Like, we are literally driving people away from New Hampshire. And the problem is that when it does crash, because it's going to, all of these foreclosures and everything that people can't afford their home, these aren't going to go to the families that are trying to be starter homes, because we don't have any of that. There's no inventory of that. You're going to have big fat cat corporations and BlackRock types that are going to come in and swoop all of that up and keep the whole thing churning. So the problem is that the burden is always on the people. The government needs to do the right thing. And the right thing is to actually have it be how it was intended, have it be fair and proportional. So, to be honest, it would be great if I had $1 million, I would literally send out text messages to every single person that's a homeowner, emails and text messages. I'd buy all that data. I'd send out a mailing to every homeowner in Rochester, and I'd do a class action against everybody that got their, I call them fraud assessments, because that's what they are. So that's how it should be. But you can't do that. You have the elderly woman that calls you on the phone crying that says she's not going to be able to live in her trailer anymore, and she doesn't know the process. And then they believe, people don't even understand how the local government even operates. They think that the state legislature, this unpaid, almost full-time job at the point is that we can just save the day, and we can't. And so it's really, really hard. It's an unbelievable burden when you're literally taking those phone calls. And not many people in here do that. I do have to say that. They don't return phone calls and they don't return emails.
Follow up?
Yes, follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In a case where an abatement is filed by the taxpayer, can the town refuse the abatement?
Yes.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Grund.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. So this bill doesn't change the amount of revenue that needs to be raised by property taxes. It would just end up changing the tax rate on people, because you still need to raise the same amount of money. So what do you think the consequences of changing to this model would be?
Well, if anybody's following, I'm not sure who here is, in Stratford County besides, of course, Representative Walker, but if anybody's following kind of like what's going on in Durham right now, they are in an absolute crisis. And that's just irresponsible government. So in Rochester, we have an unassigned fund balance that I believe has got about between 18 to 20 million in it right now. They're going to have to start digging into reserves and tightening the belt. That's going to just have to happen. You cannot continue to expect taxpayers to fill the gaps of irresponsible spending in government.
Follow up.
So changing to this model of cost replacement value, how is that going to change that concern?
What concern?
That people are still going to be taxed?
Of course, they're still going to be taxed. People are still going to be taxed. I mean, of course, but just in a realistic fashion. So the woman that has the $30,000 trailer in Rochester that now got assessed, and they say her trailer is worth $180,000, and that's on a fixed income, is going to be forced out of her home because her property taxes, which were less than $2,000, are now like almost $5,000. Like, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. So, we have to stop robbing Peter to pay Paul. My bill will fix that. There's still going to be inflation. I know building materials are still more and all of that kind of stuff, but we're not. Look at when you see the spreadsheets, you're just going to see. I mean, it's just crazy. a sale price which was completely inflated, and the assessed value is more than that. Like, it just doesn't work. So it has to be fixed.
The chair recognizes Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So according to several studies, the market share of single-family homes owned by corporations as investments went from 6% in 2000 to almost 20% in 2025. How does your bill get at solving that problem? The corporate buying of residential real estate as speculative investment and the artificial driving up of the cost of those homes. What I'm trying to get at is how would it result in more equity for the people who live in those homes as renters?
Well, I'm a renter. So, and I've lived in New Hampshire all my life. Me and my husband, we moved out for a couple of years. And when we came back, we bought a home in Concord. When COVID hit, we had a purchase and sale and they backed out. And since then, we decided that we weren't going to buy because we've just been watching what is happening. And it's just been this steady, just ridiculous. You know, a $300,000 home is now $500,000 or $600,000 or $700,000. I'm just feeling like that's just crazy when you have to, sometimes it's a dump and you have to put $100,000 into it. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I don't know if my bill necessarily stops that, but with renters, it's just, I am a renter. So I'm doing this right now I'd love to be able to buy, but with interest rates and values that are just ridiculous, I wouldn't do it. I'd move before I did that. So I believe that this levels the playing field in regards with all of that assessment piece, but you're not gonna be able to stop a greedy person, a greedy corporation, in not continuing to do this. But what I think it helps is to keep people that want to be here, that live free or die straight, and that want to stay in New Hampshire, stay in their homes, because it's unbelievable what has gone on. And just so you know, the previous administration is so much at fault for this. And I'm talking about all the way up to the executive branch. So, and I don't care, it's my party, okay? We have created a system where we have the
Representative
haves.
Potenza,
I know.
we want
All
to
right.
stick
on the
to
bill.
the policy in the
But it's
bill.
the haves and the have-nots is really what it comes down to. There's no middle anymore.
Further questions? Representative Majori is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking another question. And I'll say again, and just talk for myself, I always like to look for bills that move the needle. And I think this bill really pushes that needle. But I want to drill down on whether or not we can implement it and how soon it could be implemented. So I'm looking at new section 4 for your formulas and want to know, how are the formulas derived and with what input from what departments or companies? This is the transition to replacement cost value, the 50% and all of that. I'm just curious where that formula came from.
So your first page line.
Oh, I'm sorry. The bill I
26?
printed out it doesn't have the line up. What's the line?
Oh.
Hold on. Where am I? I am on line 28 on what page is that? 1. 28 through the next page, line, what about 3 or 4?
So when I first drafted the bill, it was more aggressive. This is like chipping away at that, which I know could possibly have to be chipped away further. And that is just to be able, those numbers really came from me working with someone that I know very well that works in a municipality, not mine, actually in Manchester. And that's very educated in this, as well as then just working with the attorneys at OLS. But this is the area where there could be some work here that is needed. And we have to talk to the people that are literally doing this. And that's why I think it's so important. 65, like I said, it's over 65% of these towns and municipalities are working or contracting this out. Most of them are using that database. Back in the day, when the assessor would come out and you'd be like, oh, don't open your door. You know what I mean? That's what my parents used to say, right? I mean, we kind of can remember that. That's not really happening anymore. I kind of do miss that personal type approach that used to happen where they're actually looking at properties. Now they're just looking at, a database and a program online. So, and there's still the level of need is just keeps going up and up and up for those jobs. So, this was actually a chipped away version, but if it needs to be chipped away again, like I just don't know exactly what's realistic, but I wanted to pull the trigger and have something on paper that would say that this would apply starting in, basically it starts in 27 because it's 26 in December when people get their tax bill, and it does that 50%.
Further questions? The chair recognizes Representative Elwood.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do you have an expert who's going to do the chipping away?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. In looking at the language at line 14 on page 1, when it gets to like kind, I understand wood for wood or steel for steel, but who decides if it's the same quality? And I'll give you an example of an antique house that has very dense wood construction as opposed to today's wood, which has like 20 rings on it instead of 125 rings.
So how it was always done, if you're talking about with assessments, it really has to do with if the house burned to the ground or the bank took over the house, it's basically the cost to be able to replace that. So yes, are those things sometimes taken into consideration a little bit, but it's not really that. It's basically looking at what is a municipality or a bank or whatever looking to recoup their costs like on that home. That's how your property tax really should be based upon. Is if that house was no longer there and had to be replaced, what is that value? And that's where some of those nuts and bolts aren't really looked into. It's the same thing, for example, how if you do certain improvements to your home, they never in the past were looked at like you did your whole backyard, you put a pool in, blah, blah, blah. Those things never usually ticked up the valuation of a home. It was more so like if you finished your basement or you did a whole brand new kitchen or bathroom, you put an addition on, added a garage. Those are like, do you know what I'm saying? More substantial type of things.
Thank you.
Further questions? The chair recognizes Representative Stavis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for taking another question. So I'm going to follow up on what Representative Majori said a little while ago. I agree that this is a bill that could move the needle. This is a bold attempt to make a fundamental change in what has been going on for the last 5-6 years in housing in New Hampshire, and as a corollary in taxation in New Hampshire. But those are not as intertwined as they may appear to be, and there are details and technical aspects of this that may impede its ability to work. And I'm wondering if you'd be amenable. I mean, I frankly would love to hear from the assessors in the room, the DRA, as to how one could implement a system like that. What would the result be? What would it cost, et cetera? Would you be amenable to working with us more on refining the technical aspects of the bill?
I would. Can I ask a question? Is this considered an early bill?
No, it is not. No.
Okay, so
not indicated.
everything is like based right now because where we're at and too many bills that people filed, where everything's under a time crunch. So I don't know if I agree. So like if this was, there's a lot of times that things are put to study and then they're not studied. Like I would be amenable. I want to strike and do something that is bold because I think that I'm sorry, the people have been waiting for something for bold for a long time and they haven't been getting that. So, but yes, it needs to be done right. It needs to be something that can be implemented. So I would say yes. I would love to see if we could push this forward. And of course, we're going to have to work with that other body as well. But yeah, I'm willing to do the work. So it took me a very long time to work on this in this testimony. So
Thank you. I heard yes several times, so I think the question was answered. The chair recognizes Representative Grund.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for taking my second question. I believe it was Representative Aylward asked, you have somebody to do this assessment or fill a cost, and I'm kind of curious on who that would be, who would be assuming what the cost of a new roof is, depending what material you put on it. Does your home have built-in bookshelves, hardwood floors, marble, laminate? Like, who's assessing this? Who has a cost list that says this is what your house is going to end up being assessed at?
that's already all
think-
done. That's been in place for decades. Like all of that stuff is already done. If you're talking about like how assessment has worked for decades, about if you're talking about replacement value or value alone, like that's already in place. Like I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Follow up?
I guess I'm asking, like, when you're talking about replacement value,
Correct.
in an accounting sense, it's the actual materials that make up what's inside that house. That's what assessment value and replacement cost typically means. So I'm trying to get to the fact of, is there a running list of what all these things are someone's going to compile, or how do you get to that replacement cost?
It's already operated by replacement costs for decades and decades. We just continue to get away from it, go back to it, get away from it, go back to it. So banks and lenders have known this forever. If you build a house and it costs you $500,000, and that house, like I said, is taken over by the bank, then you know that it's, let's say it's 2 years later in inflation, it's now $550,000 to put that same house together.
Further questions? Follow up to Representative Grund's question. I think what she was saying is, yes, albeit as you state, that the ability to determine replacement cost, it's a thing, and the banks do it and lenders do it, you say. I think the question is, how do we import that knowledge base in order then, therefore, to assess properties here in New Hampshire based on that calculus, if you will? That's the question. Maybe it's a question for assessors and DRA. Do you have an idea of how
I do, but I think
we can implement that?
I do, but I think it's hard to necessarily kind of explain this without, I'm going to send it to you. I'll literally show you like how it's been done for decades. I will show you. So
Okay.
builders do it all the time. It's banks do it all the time. All of that stuff is based market, when the cost to build a new house, all of that kind of stuff goes into, it's not, for example, like when you're building a new house and all of that kind of stuff, and then if the house isn't sold, there's a basis for that, what that was. So for example, if the house was built in whatever it may be in 2017, And at the time it was, 150,000. But now they're saying that house is worth 600,000. That there's a huge gap there. It obviously doesn't cost 600,000 to replace that $150,000 home. You have to, of course, account for inflation and all of those things. So there's brand new homes, there's additions that are put on, all of that stuff is all like in the system.
Further questions? I have a last question. Are you aware of any other states that assess based on replacement cost?
Yes. It's like a yes and no. So I have other states that are, that it is replacement cost. They use intertwine market value versus replacement value, but when I show you those spreadsheets, you're going to see that it's not skewed. Like that's the problem. The problem is that we say that it's based upon market value, but then when we have a sale price and then we have a sale price of 350, but then we say it's assessed at 400,000, that doesn't jive. So there's lots of problems within our current system to begin with.
So Representative, I understand that
Yes.
you maintain there's a problem. My question was
Yes.
examples of other states, and perhaps you could send that to the committee.
I will.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Next, the chair recognizes Representative Wheeler. Good morning, Representative, and welcome to Municipal and County Government.
Thank you, Chairman Powell and Ranking Member Davis and members and friends on the House Municipal and Government Committee. My name, for the record, is Jonah O'Ryan Wheeler, and I represent the towns of Peterborough and Sharon. And I'm here as a co-sponsor to affirm my support for Representative Potenza's legislation here. I think Representative Potenza did a very good job at going through this, so I won't belabor the points that she made. But I do want to affirm that the assessments are going out the wazoo. I have people in Peterborough who absolutely cannot afford the insane rises in assessments that are happening to their homes, and it is pricing them out of the community in which they lived, in some instances, their entire lives. And so looking at this piece of legislation, I think that it has the underlying intent of the bill and the underlying text has merit enough to where the legislature should work in some form or fashion of reassessing, changing how these assessments go about. This is a very complex issue, but as we saw in 2008, market-driven criminal speculation crashed the entire market of this country and, frankly, the world. And it's not like those criminals were prosecuted or no justice was given to the people who lost their homes from that criminal speculation. And in fact, no regulation was put in place to stop further speculation from happening. And so I think much of what we're seeing in the market right now, as Representative Potenza alluded to, is further criminal speculation using the homes of the citizens of the state of New Hampshire, but these United States of America. And so facing that reality of a potential crash, or even simply just the potential of these values continuing to rise in an artificial way, I think that returning to real assessments, not based off of market speculation, is absolutely the right thing to do, because we're talking about the tax burden of our state. Yes, these market-based assessments help the towns and cities across our state fund their local budgets. When the property values go up, the local governments get more money. But it also means that the people that are in those homes are priced out, and it changes the whole dynamic of the town when you have people who can no longer afford the property taxes in the town not living there anymore. So that's what's happening here in our state. I've had many constituents who have called me to say just that. I'm on legislation to raise taxes in some instance, and people who have called me against those bills have told me, about the assessments and how they are pricing them out. It's not that they were particularly against my tax bill, but they were against any movement on taxes because of the fact that we have completely ridiculous assessments here in the state, which are leaving people paying out the wazoo for properties that aren't worth what the market is saying that they're worth. You know, if we're going to fund state government based entirely off of property taxes, then the property value which is being taxed should be accurate to what the property actually is valued at in terms of the market. So I'm here against market-based speculative assessments, and I am totally aware that the text of this piece of legislation isn't perfect, but I also know where there's a will, there's a way. And I can tell you right now, amongst the citizenry of this state, there absolutely is a will to deal with the assessment in some form or fashion, it's early, to address the tax burden that our citizens are having here in this state. So let me just look at my notes to make sure I haven't missed anything. I guess I'll just end by saying concerns with timing and implementation should not stop what I believe is a genuine solution to what our citizens here in the state of New Hampshire are facing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you willing to take questions?
If there are any.
The chair recognizes Representative Karazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative, for allowing me my question. Was your testimony that municipalities are taking in more money from the taxpayers than they have been approved at by the legislative bodies at the town meeting or whatever?
No,
If a budget's approved, are you saying that they've raised the values to the point that they are getting more money? And if so, what are they doing with it?
my testimony was that the higher a property value is, the more money that the local and state governments receive from that property taxation. So if a house that was $30,000 in the 70s is now $500,000, then the town is making more off of that taxed property than they would be in the 70s.
Follow up?
Thank you. But unfortunately, the legislative body has to approve spending so that they can collect a certain amount of money. And then it's divided by the tax rate through all the property owners. You follow?
I am following you. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. The values of the properties have raised, and therefore people are taxed at a higher rate effectively, not the legislative rate that is set by the budget committee, the legislatures in each individual town, but by the assessment values that are happening in the state.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes Representative Grund.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. And I'm going to feed off of Representative Karazinski's question. I think what he's trying to ask is, this bill doesn't change the amount of revenue that a municipality or town is trying to raise. It would just change the tax rate. So what do you think the consequences of this bill would be?
Some towns would have less money.
Can I
Follow up? Yes.
So they don't get less money because they present budgets that get voted on, and then the tax rate is based on the value of homes, and the value of home might be replacement costs or whatever, but all it is going to change the tax rate. It doesn't change the amount of money that's in a budget that was approved by the voting body.
If the property values in a town, so in the situation in which there were real assessments and those real assessments went significantly down based off of where they were on a market speculation, then the town would have less of a tax base from which it could budget out. So in its next budget cycle, would have less of a tax base to tax. That is correct. Yes, it is. The tax burdens that we have in our state are based off of the tax base that exists in the towns. If the towns had less valued property, then the tax base in the towns would be less, and therefore the next budget that would pass would have less money in it.
Further questions? Representative Walker is recognized.
I think the way you stated that, it would have less money, but the tax rate would go up. So do you really believe that the tax rate wouldn't go up with the implementation of this bill?
I think that that is up to each individual town and city to make. So each individual town and city would have the determination, the ability to determine whether they'd raise their tax rate to meet where the assessment, so if the assessments drop off, they could raise the tax rate to meet where those assessments dropped off from, but they would have the option to do that. Towns and cities make those determinations for themselves, and so I wouldn't say that by default the tax rate would go up in all these towns and cities. Could I just really quickly, I would also add that the assessments is something that people don't have any say over. The tax rate is something that the citizens of the town do have a say over. And so the tax rate prior to it going up would have to face the citizens on a ballot. And I would question whether the people of every town and city in the state, all 234 of them, would vote to raise their taxes in as significant a way that would be needed to meet the assessment change.
Further questions? Representative Elwood is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Welcome to our committee. This bill doesn't raise taxes or increase municipal revenue on its own. It only changes the valuation methodology with a phased transition, correct?
As far as I understand it, yes.
Thank you.
Further questions? I have a question. So do you understand that in New Hampshire, spending is approved locally, local control, local property taxes? So the spending, proposed spending is approved locally by the voters. So that's approved spending, the money for that is assessed or levied over the tax base. And so that portion for each property tax owner times the tax rate equals the approved spending. And the approved spending is raised no matter what. So if you lower the assessment, the tax rate needs to go up. If you increase property assessments, the tax rate goes down. But at the end of the day, the spending that was approved locally by the voters to raise and appropriate, it's collected. So I hear the testimony, but it doesn't, there's something that's not connecting in the testimony, and you have a response.
The spending is, I don't disagree with anything you've said. And to be frank, I'm not, and by any means whatsoever, an expert on the system. That's why you're all in municipal and county, and I'm not. But the spending is approved yearly. And so say this was implemented and the assessments went down, then the spending would be reapproved in a new budget. And so yes, the budget that had been passed by, whether it's an SB2 town or not, in town meeting would be approved for the remainder of that budget cycle. I'm not discounting that or debating that by any means whatsoever, but I'm saying that if the assessments did change, then the tax base that the town could use for its next budget cycle would be different. And I don't, am I mistaken on that? I'm hearing no from the audience. I'm hearing yes from the committee. So I don't know.
We can move forward for further questions.
I mean, nothing is that simple, Representative Majori, but trying to distill it into one sentence, you have to make something pretty simple. So.
Well, we appreciate your testimony. Seeing no further questions, thank you. So next, the chair recognizes Mr. Bourne.